Hi, I'm Monica Weldon, and first and foremost, I am the mother of Beckett Weldon, my son who has a rare neurological disorder called SYNGAP1. I'm also the president, CEO, and founder of the nonprofit organization called Bridge the Gap, SYNGAP Education and Research Foundation. And we're located here in Houston. Well, part of our mission is to serve families and drive research and education for this disorder. Part of that, besides driving the science and supporting families, is our organization is also involved in pushing legislation through that will help fund science that we can support, or that our scientists will delve into and be able to have funding for, that I can support them with a letter of support with our patient registry data. And so we sign on to congressional letters that will drive orphan drug products, repurposing of drug products, and science that will maybe possibly come up with a treatment for our children in the future. We are also looking at gene therapy, and gene therapy is very expensive. And so, you know, a small organization like ours, we can't raise the kind of money that's needed to develop a drug. And so it's important that we support legislation at the congressional, both federal and state levels, to encourage incentives for drug companies, to encourage funding to the NIH and the FDA. So I'm very involved in those bits and pieces. And the reason why it's so important is because SYNGAP1 is actually a gene that is linked and responsible for brain plasticity, which is really important, how the brain repairs itself and how it makes connections to new learning and memory. And so, in short, SYNGAP1 is actually nicknamed the memory and learning gene. So, you know, we kind of hit it at all levels. I spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C. talking to legislators. I spend a lot of time talking to the scientists at the National Institute of Health of the NIH. I also attend many FDA workshops where patient engagement and the patient voice is incredibly important in driving to treatments. And so working with all these three agencies and the capacity in which we can as an organization helps accelerate finding treatments, not just for us, but also rare diseases as a whole, but also even other common diseases. Because this gene, SYNGAP1, was just discovered actually in animal models in 1998. It was discovered in humans in 2009. And since 2009, of course, my son was diagnosed in 2012. I started the organization in 2014. And as we've moved along in the last 3.5 years as an organization, with the data that we've collected from our very small patient population, we've been able to find new mechanisms in this gene that link to other disorders such as Fragile X, Phelan-McDermott syndrome, also Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's. Any type of neurodegenerative disorder, it looks like it's falling back and linked somehow, even cancer, because our gene runs what they call on the RAS pathway where cancer messages follow in the brain. And so we don't know how that's linked yet. That's why the science behind this is so important, because how are we linked to that? So we are now in drug discovery at one of our labs here in the United States at Scripps, Florida. And we also work with 6 other labs worldwide, Johns Hopkins being one. We have Edinburgh University in Scotland. We have the Austin Center at Melbourne University in Australia. We have Baylor College of Medicine here in Houston, Texas, that are all on board in driving the science. And so it's just important to hit every area, not just science, not just the patients, but federal and legislative type pushes. Because at the top, really honestly, is where it begins. Because if you can't get changes in policy at the top, eventually that is going to trickle down to the patient, especially in reimbursement. we're fighting for reimbursement changes because of the fact that some of these orphan rare diseases have such expensive medications, and the discounts don't fall back on the patients. So we have to incentivize pharmaceutical and industry to want to invest in us. Because if you look at rare disease as a whole, there are 33 million people in the United States that have a rare disease. That's 1 in 10 people that have a rare disease. So that's a huge population. In fact, that's more than cancer and HIV combined. So even though they're all little different diseases, they are all linked somehow. So investing in rare diseases and also supporting organizations like mine will help us drive to treatments probably to other disorders as well. So that's kind of where we're at and where we're going and where I'm driving this thing.